teleconnections, not particularly supportive of an Arctic outbreak. We've seen the North Atlantic oscillation trend down a little bit, but no big deflection into negative Arctic oscillation territory, negative AO, like we saw with cold waves like Uri in 2021. Negative AO, that's usually associated with a slowdown in the hemispheric circulation and wave-breaking episodes in the large-scale flow. That helps to drive Arctic air south. The Madden-Julian oscillation will be in phase 1 through 3 over the next week or so. That's very favorable for cold waves east of the Rockies, but it practically gallops over to phase 4 and 5 about 2 weeks from now. That's not very supportive of cold weather east of the Rockies, so I'm not too sure how long we're going to hold on to this cold weather, unless you're in places like Grand Forks and the Great Lakes, where they've been getting slammed over and over. Significant changes in the weather over the country this afternoon. Strong cold advection sweeping into Minnesota, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Wyoming, and even all the way back into the Intermountain region. The Great Basin also getting some northerly flow, although temperatures are rather mild, 30s and 40s this afternoon. We've got the appearance of blowing dust in West Texas all the way back to just south of El Paso. That's restricting visibilities in places like Lubbock, Midland, and Abilene. Warm advection setting up ahead of this wave out there in East Texas up to the Ozarks, and 50s starting to make an appearance out there in the Quad Cities and parts of northwestern Illinois, even 40s into parts of the western Great Lakes. And we'll just take a peek north and look at what's on tap there. Some very cold air up to the north. Afternoon temperatures below minus 20. I think the coldest reading that I'm seeing is right here north of Manitoba, minus 29. Actually, I see a minus 31 at Johaven, Nunavut. So that is where the cold air is coming from, and the thickness contours bowing south through the Canadian Rockies. And do we have a push of cold air? Yes, we do. 1048 millibars in the Northwest Territories, and that is enough to push a pretty good chunk of cold air into the central and eastern U.S. Up at 500 millibars, about 3 miles or 5 kilometers, long wave ridge extending from the eastern Pacific into Yukon. So no wonder they have some mild weather in that part of the continent. To the east of that ridge, we're opening up that northerly flow coming out of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories that's helping to dislodge that cold air. The 1050 millibar high also giving it a pretty good push, and as a result we're getting that strong cold advection into the northern plains this afternoon. Long wave troughing extending from Hudson Bay into the Great Lakes and the Deep South. And a little bit of ridging on the east coast across New York City up to the St. Lawrence River. And we'll just take a look at the 850 millibar chart. This is up at about 5,000 feet, so this gets a little bit above the ground. And there you can see the cold air flowing south into northern Oklahoma, northern Missouri, and on the other side we've actually got an 850 millibar warm front extending from Michigan into West Virginia. And there is the warm conveyor belt bringing up warm, moist air from the Gulf, tapping it about right there, but this trajectory right here across central Texas, that's coming from the Mexican and West Texas Plateau region, carrying that dust to the east. And here it is. You can see the dust develop early in the afternoon. Just watch out there in West Texas, and there it is. A couple different sources, crop fields, open rangeland, and even some playas out there west of El Paso. I'll give you a look at that region. That's that playa that I'm talking about, southwest of El Paso. And that's got a lot of dust coming off it as well. And you can see gravity waves near the top. And we can check out the observations, some very strong winds from Midland up to Levelland, both reporting 44 knots, which is 50 miles an hour. And the symbols for dust and sand showing up in the observations all the way out to Brownwood, out to Breckenridge, and up to Lubbock, basically in that same corridor there. And we don't get any observations in Mexico. I guess there's no funding for that, so that's kind of a data void, but we can certainly see that on the visible satellite imagery. In the northeastern U.S. today, fair skies to cloudy conditions up there in New York. Temperatures have been in the 30s with 40s down to the south. We do have a winter storm watch, which has just been issued. This runs Saturday night through Monday morning across the northeastern U.S. from eastern West Virginia, where they frequently get those blizzard conditions in the mountains. Goes up to eastern Pennsylvania, skirts the outer western parts of the Washington, D.C. metro, Baltimore, Philadelphia. We may see winter weather advisories issued tomorrow for those areas, but in the core of this watch area, 46 inches of snow will be common, with up to a foot in the mountains. This is the best guess of snow totals through the weekend and into Monday. Looking at widespread 7 to 10 inch amounts, these appear to have come up a little bit. The Washington, D.C. area looking at about 2 inches, 5 inches at Philadelphia, and 5 inches around New York, 3 inches around Boston. These are human-produced forecasts. I'm not going to go into slicing and dicing the models because they all have different biases and eccentricities, and there's a lot of guesswork involved, and I don't really get too much into that unless I'm looking at a specific area, such as, my own house. Further out into the Midwest area, looking at about 1 to 2 inches, but you can see those amounts really pick up in the mountains, and of course the lake effect snows. Those will certainly be a factor as those strong northwest winds get going, up to about a foot between Hamburg and Erie. Further out to the west in the Midwest region, a fair day around Chicago, temperatures coming up sharply into the upper 40s and 50s, 47 for Chicago. The Great Lakes overall, however, remaining in the 30s this afternoon. We have widespread wind advisories on the north shores of the Michigan UP and gale warnings out in the lakes themselves due to strong southerly winds. And heading into the Minnesota Arrowhead, we've got winter weather advisories today for snow and blowing snow as that next system tracks through the region. In the southeastern region, no significant weather except for this little disturbance here. That is bringing rain showers to parts of southeast Texas and Louisiana. Temperatures very mild this afternoon, 60s throughout the deep south and into Florida, with 50s in Tennessee and the Carolinas. And of course, as we mentioned, in Texas, blowing dust feeding in behind this weather system. Let's take a quick look at the upper air dynamics, because it is a very dynamic weather pattern. And we do see that a jet max is involved. That right there, you can see the pinching of the height field and the channeled appearance of the vorticity shading. So this red right here, that's positive vorticity. It's elongated, parallel to the height lines, and that's an indicator that we've got channeling of the upper level flow. So this here is a band of very strong winds, 80 knots at 500 millibars, probably quite a bit stronger aloft, and the divergent left front quadrant moving across Arkansas this evening, and most of the rest of Texas probably right there underneath that jet streak. So we already talked about the wind. Let's look at the temperatures, and we do have some very warm conditions, 70s all the way from the central Texas region, the Hill Country, into the Wichita Falls and even the Altus area. So this is one last look of something that we're not going to see again for a while, maybe late next week, but yeah, 70s. And also I almost analyzed a dry line in this area because this is kind of a post-dry line type air mass. But ahead of it, there's not been much moisture return yet. This moisture return just started, so we're not advecting very much of that northward. But you can probably put a dry line in there, something like that. 26 at Brownwood versus 41 to the west of Waco. So yeah, that would be a borderline dry line, and that would extend south, maybe something like that. So you could certainly analyze that, and that might be a pattern you would see in the early spring. So let's wrap this up very quickly. Wind advisories, high wind warnings. Is that one there in Lubbock? Is that a high wind warning? Yeah, it is. So yeah, these are going to expire around dusk. Those are for winds up to 60 miles an hour, wind advisories up to 50 miles an hour through the rest of West Texas, and those go all the way back towards Van Horn and whatever, can't remember the name of that city there. The blowing dust advisories are mostly east of the Davis Mountains. And I think that's probably about all there is to say about that. And then you can see as we go north, we pick up a winter storm warning. Northeast New Mexico, all of Saturday, 3 to 6 inches there. The highest amounts in the passes north of Raton. Very scenic. I don't know if you've ever been there on Interstate 25. Very windy road. Goes up to about 8,000 feet. Pretty impressive there. Winter weather advisories back to Dalhart, Las Vegas, New Mexico, and then we pick up more of those all the way into the higher plains of eastern Colorado. And let's look at that area. We'll stop that around late afternoon, and you can see that cold advection flowing south. Cloud streets out there around Grand Forks and Trinidad flowing southward. Those are parallel to the wind flow. That's an indicator of some instability very close to the surface, but of course it is capped by the frontal inversion. Anyway, cold air on its way south, and Colorado looking pretty nice this afternoon, but they will be getting some bad weather. The western Colorado plains, like we said, the US 40 corridor, I-70, all the way to Kansas, they are under a winter weather advisory that runs this evening through tomorrow. There could be 3 to 7 inches near Interstate 25, 1 to 4 inches of snow further east. The Denver area looking for flash freezing of roadways, so that could be a driving hazard. Winter weather advisories also extend into the northern Colorado Rockies, the Front Range, mostly above 8,000 feet in that area. That includes Idaho Springs, Breckenridge, Vail. Those areas expecting 4 to 10 inches of snow tonight into Saturday. And I guess some graphics would help. There's the extent of those winter weather advisories going all the way back into parts of north central Colorado. These aqua colors, those are actually cold weather advisories. They just issued these this afternoon, starting around Denver and going all the way up into much of the northern plains. So let's look at that there. You can see a huge mess of blizzard warnings, snowfall warnings, what is that? Extreme high wind warning out there in eastern North Dakota. So yeah, if you're driving through that area, you probably need to maybe stop watching this video and look at some official weather sources, because you don't want to put your life on the line trying to cut through there on some of those roads if you're not prepared for what you have ahead of you. And this is what we're talking about. Blizzard conditions right in that area. Northwestern Minnesota should be starting to let up in northeastern North Dakota over the next few hours, but hazardous conditions, very cold temperatures, gusty northwest winds that extends all the way down into South Dakota and into Nebraska. In the southwestern region, fair skies and the Santa Ana winds have finally subsided. Temperatures rather mild, looking at upper 60s for highs in the lower deserts, lower 60s in the San Joaquin Valley and in the Los Angeles area, 40s in the Great Basin area with 40 for a high at Salt Lake City. Frost advisory in effect for the central coastal valleys right around here as temperatures approach freezing tonight. That includes King City, the Diablo Range, and the Santa Lucia Range. In the northwestern U.S., we do have winter weather advisories through western Montana into the Bitterroots. They're expecting up to 3 inches through that region. However, most of this area is under the influence of upper-level ridging. And looking at the surface map, fair skies across much of the Great Basin area, but some fog around Salem and Eugene. It's been brought to my attention that that is not the Willamette Valley. It's actually pronounced the Willamette Valley. I did some digging around. That error is because we all assume Willamette, that must be a French word. It turns out we were dealing with an American Indian word that somehow somebody decided it wasn't snooty enough, so they made it look a little bit more European. So that's how we got that kind of botched spelling of that word. So it is Willamette. Hopefully I don't make that error again. Stratus and fog keeping the temperatures down, 40 to 41. 42 at Seattle, 43 at Bellingham, and up at beautiful, sunny Vancouver, looking at 43 this evening. And as we mentioned, there is a little bit of cold air advection moving into the Pacific Northwest. Wasn't really enough to detect on that surface chart, but on the synoptic chart, yeah, it does show up for sure. All right, heading out into the Pacific and into Alaska, deep southerly flow. And that's usually a wet pattern for Alaska and also a warm one as well. And those temperatures certainly well up there, looking at upper 30s and even 40s in southwestern Alaska. As we mentioned, winter storms through tomorrow in western Alaska. Do we have any viewers out there? Nobody? All I'm hearing is silence, so I guess we don't have anybody out there. If I'm wrong, leave a comment. Nome, located right there. You've probably heard of Nome. Winter storm warning through 3 p.m. tomorrow there, 7 to 14 inches. Did you know that they have a movie theater there, a modern movie theater? You want to take a look at this? This is the theater for Nome, Alaska. So you can catch your favorite blockbuster movies at that cinema. I just took a look at the surface map and I noticed minus 52 in Chukotka. Sorry, this may be a little bit illegible, but I don't want to take too much time setting this up. There's that minus 52. The rest of Siberia looking pretty typical for this time of year. Around the Yakutsk area, minus 42, minus 46. That's not super cold for that area. Super cold there would be minus 60. So I guess a lot of the bitter cold temperatures are up there in those valleys right in here. And of course, that other station, I'm not sure all the names, but this is where we're talking about Oymyakon and some of those areas. That's going to be right in those trapped, those isolated valleys. That's where cold air loves to collect. So a lot of records set in that part of Russia and elsewhere around Alaska. Yeah, they've got a winter storm or a winter weather advisory on the Dalton Highway between Adigan Pass up to pump station number 2. Winter weather advisories there on the highway through tomorrow morning as strong southerly downslope winds pick up snow off the ground there in the Brooks Range and cut that visibility down to half of a mile. Okay, in the Northwest Territories, 1048 millibar high, that anticyclone is strengthening, and all that cold air, as we mentioned, is coming south. We have had a blizzard warning in southern Manitoba right there around Winnipeg. Winds gusting up to 55 miles an hour. The problem areas are shifting into Ontario tonight. I'm not going to go through all the watches and warnings because there's been a lot to keep track of. But yeah, check your latest advisories if you're driving the Transcan Highway. Extreme cold warnings posted in that area as well. I didn't see very much out in eastern Canada. So Ontario, Western Ontario, that's going to be the main problem area for tonight. All right, let's put the maps into motion with the expertly analyzed weather maps. It's easy to get model data that looks like this, but the actual fronts, that takes a expert analyst, and so, I do those myself. So you're looking at the fronts as they're analyzed by me. So going into tomorrow morning, that front makes its way into the Ohio River Valley, into Texas. Cold advection sweeps southward. A big change in the northern plains. Highs will be sub-zero from Duluth to Fargo to Minot northward. The freeze line tomorrow afternoon running from about Detroit down to St. Louis, Tulsa, Amarillo, and 30s and 40s further to the south. Colorado remaining in the teens and 20s statewide except for the Four Corners area. A little bit of blocking by the Rockies, so here we'll see 30s for highs. Snow all across Colorado into northeastern New Mexico, and that will wind down as we go into evening. So Saturday night, we're going to see a reinforcing surge of cold air driving south. And we can check that out on the 850 millibar chart. There's surge number 1 coming south, and here's surge number 2 tomorrow afternoon, just diving through the Great Plains. through the afternoon and into tomorrow evening. So you'll certainly feel it if you're in the central U.S. So going into tomorrow evening, well, initially we're going to have rain through the Ohio River Valley into Pennsylvania, and that will switch over to snow as we get later in the day. It will increase in intensity in the Ohio River Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, all changing over to snow. We may see winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. Then we go into Sunday. That cold air continues pouring south. Look at the 540 decameter 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness line all the way south into Waco, Shreveport, and into Huntsville, and 500 decameters all the way into South Dakota. So that is a signal of very cold and very deep cold air. So for Sunday, it's going to be a cold day. We're going to see 20s for highs down to Kentucky, the Ozarks, and into Oklahoma. 30s to northern Mississippi and into North Texas. And then we see our next wave dropping through the Rockies right in here. That's what you're going to want to watch if you're in the central U.S. You can see that area of clouds coming together and frontogenesis, this little wave also picking up there in Albuquerque. That's all some upper and mid-level dynamics coming together and increasing those temperature contrasts in the lower levels. In the eastern U.S., cold air advection, widespread snow through the northeastern corridor. Rain, snow changeover line early on Sunday around Maryland, Virginia, and gradually things clear out very quickly. Snow totals, as we mentioned, we showed you that map earlier, looking for possibly up to 10 inches across Pennsylvania and into the northeast region. Then we go into Monday. You can see that little wave coming down south and merging with these dynamics out in the western Gulf. Looks like development of snow for Monday night in Texas, possibly some freezing rain and sleet down to the Interstate 10 corridor. Temperatures in that region are actually pretty mild, upper 20s and 30s, so this is not a repeat of Uri in 2021. We could still see a lot of mixed precip and some heavy snow down there in central Texas into eastern Texas. We're not going to know the exact accumulations until later this weekend, but if you live in that area, you want to just prepare anyway and make sure you're okay for a few days. You know, that's common sense, really, so keep that in mind. Wintry weather could be a problem, and that'll all shift to the east going into Tuesday. There it is. Could see snow all the way down to New Orleans, down to Lake Charles, and down to Lafayette. That's kind of a rare event for that to come that far south, but we've got this very strong low down there in the Gulf, and things push rapidly into Florida. Tuesday and Wednesday, those are going to be our coldest days in the northeastern U.S. Highs around New York City, about 17, 24 in Washington, D.C., and into the single digits and teens in New England. Overnight lows could be down to minus 10 around Pittsburgh, minus 8 at Cleveland, and lots of minus 10s in the Allegheny valleys. So if you're in that area, make sure your car is winterized and ready to start if you're heading to work around midweek, because it will be brutal in that part of the country. So Wednesday, one more day of frigid weather in the northeastern U.S. Then we see moderation. And we've got pretty much a lot of high pressure across the country. Going into late in the week, another Alberta Clipper dives to the southeast. This is starting to get well into the extended period, so we're not really sure what's going to happen there. But some stormy weather starting to appear. Where did that come from in California? Yeah, probably a continuation of that wave right there. Some development on the tail end and what looks like maybe a deep trough for a cutoff low in California. So probably another chance of precip coming up for California. This is not Santa Ana winds. We could get some strong west-northwest flow, but the humidities will be up. That'll be one positive thing about this next weather system. Precipitation. Well, that's pretty uncertain because we're talking about winter, California, 240 hours out. We just don't really know what the atmospheric rivers are going to be doing at that time frame. So check back in a week and we'll take another look. All right, we'll be back again on Monday for the special private Patreon supporter version. deep in the icebox, deep in the Arctic air. If you want to catch us, head to Patreon and get signed up, and you'll be helping to support this project. Otherwise, we'll see you back here on Wednesday for another edition of Forecast Lab. Hope you have a great weekend. Stay warm. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.